I'm your host, Elaine Miller-Karras. You can also watch this broadcast on Resiliency Within's YouTube channel. And if you want to contact me, you can reach me at elaine@resiliencywithin.com. I would like to welcome my guest today, Brooklyn Raney. She holds an MA from NYU and is currently completing a doctorate in education at the University of Pennsylvania. Congratulations on that. That's a very good university, Brooklyn. I
Thank
happen
you.
to know. She's an experienced teacher, coach, and speaker. She serves as a consultant for schools, camps, and youth serving organizations around the world. She actually just told me she's actually helping some Girl Scout leaders in Shanghai right now, and I want to learn more about that. And today we're going to talk about her book and the organization she founded. And they have the same name. It's called One Trusted Adult, which, by the way, I love that. I love the way you've crafted the title of your organization and your book. So, Brooklyn will address why it is essential that all adults in contact with young people need to know her ABCs of being a trusted adult, which includes being accessible, boundaried, and caring. So welcome, Brooklyn. I'm so glad you're here with me today. And she's in New Hampshire. I'm in California. So, and this is the incredible, brilliance of radio is that we can talk together and feel like we're in the same room together. So, what's on your mind today as we get started?
Well, first, gratitude. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the good work that you do. And thank you for saying that one trusted adult. I appreciate you. That was not hard to come to. It's been my mission for a long time, and excited to talk to you about it today. What's on my mind?
Yes, what's on your mind?
What's on my mind right now, honestly, is burnout, is teacher, parent, youth serving professional burnout and fatigue. They are tired, and I am worried.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, we've certainly heard the same thing on our show. We have had a number of people that work with schools, and it was hard before the pandemic. But I think the pandemic for many people sent them over the edge. And now, here's many people, of course, are back in school now. Although sometimes, I hear that, oh, they've had a COVID outbreak, so they're back online. And I think it's kind of been erratic. Um,
Erratic is a good word.
yeah,
Just
it's been erratic, hasn't it?
the routine is gone. It is every day is a different day. And as they try to focus on connection and community, everything feels like it's testing that and pushing back and shooting up obstacles everywhere for them to be able to do that. And they're trying to take care of themselves. They're trying to take care of their families. They're trying to take care of each other. And there's not much left in the tank to show up for young people except to deliver curriculum, which we know isn't always effective without pouring into the community and the connection piece.
Well, and also we know that if teachers are traumatized, they affect children's abilities to learn because it actually affects their nervous system. So,
Yes.
I mean, the work that you're doing in helping the teachers and the administrators and parents and all that, I mean, want to hear more about it. But I always like to ask to start out with about here you are clearly very passionate about this work, Brooklyn. We've been talking before the show started, and so what was it about your lived experience that led you to work with to write One Trusted Adult and to
Yeah.
work in this arena?
I think looking back on my childhood, I grew up in a small town in Ontario, Canada, and I was surrounded by many trusted adults. So the concept of one, it was like, no way that I have grandparents down this block, grandparents the other block, aunts, uncles, coaches, neighbors, lifeguards, the school secretary. Like, if I had to make a list of the trusted adults who showed up for me, it would be lengthy. And they are incredible, incredible human beings who I felt cared about me, were invested in my success, invested in my development, really were role models. And then I had the amazing fortune of being a decently good ice hockey goalie from Canada. And I went off to boarding school in Indiana, actually, where again I was surrounded by incredible trusted adults. And it wasn't until I entered into working in schools in many different capacities and working with students that I realized not every child in the US or Canada could say the same, not even close. And that struck me, and that was hard for me. And so I worked really hard to be that trusted adult for so many. And then it was actually in an auditorium, in a school auditorium, when I was dean of students at a boarding school in New Hampshire. And in 1 month, we had 3 prevention programs you know them well, like the bullying prevention program, the substance abuse prevention program, and a suicide prevention program. And every single one ended with make sure you reach out and find a trusted adult, talk to a trusted adult. And this term came up so often in such a short period of time that it really like struck me between the eyes. And I just started asking, like, what does that really mean through the eyes of the adults working with young people and through the eyes of the young people? Like, are they looking around this auditorium and saying, I'm surrounded by trusted adults? Do they see us that way? And do the adults who are showing up to the building every day step into that role? Do they step up to the plate in that way? Are they there to teach chemistry and, coach basketball? Or are they believing that part of their role in showing up for young people is to be that trusted adult? And when I couldn't find sort of a universal definition or a program to help schools ensure that young people had that trusted adult at home and at school, I set out to create it, just to begin researching for my own school and my own work. But then it just grew and grew and grew. And you see where I am today, working with all kinds of schools and youth serving organizations to keep this a primary focus of their work all year long.
Well, and even when you talked about, what first inspired you about these 3 different programs, very important programs, but yet siloed, right? Oh, this is for this, and this is for this, and this is for this, when really the overarching theme that I just heard from you was that, well, if we have one trusted adult, there may not be bullying, there may not be suicide attempts. It may change the whole trajectory of how children are supported.
That is my strong belief, that if we go upstream away from these behaviors that most scare us and our biggest worries for youth, if we go upstream, all the protective factors are the same. And one of those protective factors is a trusted adult.
Absolutely. And I know that there's work being done by Dr. Christina Bethel at Johns Hopkins that actually is total in alignment in what you're saying. So now we even have neuroscience that's saying that it's not only our belief, which of course is very important, but it's wonderful that we're hearing that, oh, and yes, it means that it can help children feel more protected and also safer in whatever environment they're in, because we know that many children grow up in homes that have violence, or there's so much ups and downs in the child's life, that to have a person who's involved with them either in school programs or out of school programs. I mean, Girl Scouts is something that is an adjunct to schools. What a difference that could make if the trusted adults knew your ABCs, which I want to get into more, of course. So can you explain the concept of one trusted adult in a little bit more detail?
Sure. Well, the research shows that when a young person can name a trusted adult at home and at school, or in whatever spaces they spend a lot of time, so I assume home and school, but there are other spaces, they're less likely to suffer from depression, they are less likely to abuse substance, and they're less likely to bully or be bullied. And where I like to spin that conversation to is they are more likely then to, and there's research that shows this, more likely to remain calm in the face of challenges, which is something you and I talked about in the pre-show, develop a strong sense of resiliency, handle stress. They're more likely to engage in school activities and activities after school, more likely to volunteer in their communities. And I think so important to schools is they're more likely to be available for learning. That when they have that trusted adult, they can show up available to learn. And so we've taken that research to say this shows why it's so important, and we want to talk to everyone about that. But then how do we do it? And how do we create specific strategies and tools? And what we found in interviewing hundreds and hundreds of people across the continent is that trusted adults who show up for young people show up with these 3 really important qualities, and that's being accessible, being boundaried, and being caring. And we always show them in our trainings as 3 circles that link. So accessible overlaps with boundaries, and caring overlaps with boundaries, because the boundaries really centers it and keeps it sustainable and protects us from burnout.
Well, and especially when you're a teacher, I mean, you can have so many children that need you. Is that how do you, I guess the question I always have, well, how do you do that? You have all these kids and you see all these needs, and you talked about you're concerned about the burnout you're seeing.
Yes.
And even as you were talking, I'm going, so many teachers have shared with me how hard it was to be on Zoom or whatever platform they were using, because so many of those conversations, when they were being that one trusted adult, happened after the chemistry, the
Yes.
chemistry class was over, and they could come and say, well, something's happening. And those informal conversations were, I think, were impacted. I mean, I don't know if you can, touch upon that. What's been your experience with that during the pandemic?
Yeah, we always say like the real work is in the fringes of the work that we're assigned
Yeah,
to
the
do.
French, that's a lot. I love the way you say that. Yes.
It is in the conversations in passing between classes or before practice or after practice. Like all of the really most important work is in those moments. And great trusted adults and great coaches and great teachers and great parents recognize that and make time for that. And great organizations and great schools honor that and understand that.
Yeah.
So there's one study out of the University of Rochester that shows young people at school. They interviewed over 10,000 students. I think it was across 40 or 50 schools. And it showed on the low end, only 6% of students in a school could name a trusted adult at school.
Oh my
And on the
gosh.
high end, I know, take your breath away kind of stuff. And on the high end, I think it was about 53%. But of that, what's really interesting is that that's not every kid naming a different adult. We find that within that, the same adults get named over and over, and those adults are the counselors and the charismatic.
Well, I've noticed something else, and I would be curious, Brooklyn, if you found this. When I would be working in schools, sometimes the kids would tell me it was the school janitor.
Oh
That
yeah.
they would go up to the school janitor, and that school janitor always would make time for
Yes.
those kids. And
Yes.
so I think it's not necessarily someone who's in a designated role. I call those natural leaders.
Hmm.
And I think you would call them trusted adults,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
That also help to support um, children.
the the possibilities are everywhere. It could be the interaction you have with the barber or the server at a restaurant. I mean, these interactions can be 2 minutes, they can be 2 years, they can be lifetimes. But these interactions of when we talk about, you can either ignore the moment, you can embrace the moment, or you can exploit the moment. And we can talk about boundaries in a little bit. The big capital letter B boundaries of neglect and abuse and the exploitation. But there's a lot of adults missing these moments or ignoring these moments where they have to make a young person feel seen, valued, important, named. And so we're trying to give skills and strategies for pushing people into that opportunity to embrace the engagement, embrace the relationship.
So I'm curious too. So like when you're one trusted adult and you go in with your program to a school, and so the administrators say, oh, we want you to come in, and you start talking to people about this, and you just give that statistic.
Mm-hmm.
Have you done post evaluations to see if you coming in is making an impact of people maybe changing their mindset about
Yes.
how to reach out to children? I'd love to hear more about that.
Appreciate the question because I'm so excited to talk about this.
To tell me the results of it. Yes,
Yes.
please.
We have created something called Operation OTA. And I don't have the final statistics for you, but anecdotally, we are definitely seeing what you're talking about, which is an increase in young people being able to name a trusted adult and spreading out the number of adults that they name so that adults aren't looking, or educators aren't looking at this as one more thing to do, right? When the PD person comes in, it's like, ugh, one more thing they're asking me to do. It's not that. It's a little tiny shift of a mindset to open yourself up to the possibility of being a trusted adult for young people, and then realizing actually they'll show up better behaved and more available to learning to your content, to your class if you invest in this way. So Operation OTA does two things. Well, three things actually. One is it engages adults and it assesses from the adult lens of put a star next to a young person or your name next to a young person's picture who you believe you do show up and you do have a connection for. And there's 4 questions that you answer to determine whether or not you might be somebody that this person trusts. And so that it's the first assessment plus some professional development training on the ABCs and the universal youth needs, etc. And then it actually works with young people too. There's lesson plans for middle school through high school on what a trusted adult looks like and why I should even consider investing in a relationship with a teacher or a coach. Why does it matter, right? Dr. Jean Rhodes, her work on mentorship is incredible. And she says we need to stock the pond and we need to teach them to fish. That this can't be one-sided. We can't tell the young people, go find trusted adults, and the adults are like, what are you talking about? We can't train the
And where
adults.
are they? Another thing is, of course, as you may know, I'm an old trauma therapist, And sometimes people that were, pretended to be trusted adults were not trusted adults. So is there some kind of training for the kids about how to be aware of warning signals that maybe someone is asking them to do things that are not in that trusted adult realm?
Absolutely. So that's part of the ABCs model. Everything that we develop for adults, we use language that can easily be translated to young people. I think it's so important that we use the same words: accessible, boundaried, and caring. When we talk about the boundaries with young people, we talk about all the things that you're talking about. Like, how does someone respect my time, my body, my belongings, my thoughts, my ideas, and we break down exactly what that means. We don't go fully into child abuse protection, as there's incredible organizations out there like Darkness to Light or the Monique Burr Foundation that are doing unbelievable work.
Mm-hmm.
So we are upstream a little bit from that, where we're just we would never talk about trust and connection without the boundary and the protection and the safety piece. Never talk about them
Well,
separately.
I'm really glad that you have boundary as actually one of the concepts, and it's not only for the trusted adult, but for the children, so then they know that they can say, no, that's not okay for me.
Exactly.
And so, because I think part of being children learning is also learning to say no, which can be very hard for kids because adults are more powerful. So then that seems to be very integral in what we would teach them.
That is exactly it. And we have found this model that works. I think that you'll you'll like it. We break down boundaries because there's that word can get used in a lot of different spaces, from the most serious to just the idea of like saying no. Or even like self-care practices. We hear it often. So we talk about brick wall boundaries, and those are the non-negotiables, the law. We talk about chain link fence boundaries, and those are, maybe your parents can walk through the gate in that fence, but your teacher can't. Like, there's different relationships you have with adults based on whether it's formal or informal, if it's at home or if it's at school. And then we talk about baby gate boundaries, which is where we negotiate trust. Like, that gate can move based on how safe you feel when you're vulnerable with that person. And some days you could trust a lot, and you can also pull that back. That's something you use your emotional intelligence, and you can adjust. And then the final is the invisible fence. And I love the invisible fence because it's all the ways we set up tiny boundaries or invisible boundaries within our schools and organizations, telling young people what is celebrated here, what is popular here, what's important here, what we elevate. And our bulletin boards send a message about that, and our school announcements send a message about that, and who we highlight. And so we talk about hidden culture, and that being a boundary we need to assess as well, because that takes us into, about gender, about race, about ability. It gets us into all kinds of space about what is celebrated here, and what messages I'm receiving about what it means to be a good human, or to succeed.
Well, the other thing that strikes me as you're talking, I was thinking that, well, if we had this in every school, and this was so part of the culture, I'm thinking about how it ripples to children, let's say, date rapes and things that happen, bullying, right? Because it almost sounds to me so foundational that if those tenets that you're talking about are so integrated by the school, by the teachers, the administration, and also by the parents, I would think, is also because parents can be trusted, but they can sometimes not be trusted adults.
Yes.
But also with the kids have I would think, a discernment process that they're learning at an early age
Mhm.
of how to determine who are the trusted people in their lives, not just the adults, but when they have their peer-to-peer reactions. I mean, have you seen that ripple down? I mean, I'm just kind of, my brain is firing and so excited,
Yes.
Brooklyn, about what you're doing.
I love it. Yeah, I think we see this golden thread from kindergarten through 12th grade and beyond. So I mostly work K-12, but we see the need for this work in higher ed as well. But that's that's another project for another time in my life. But in kindergarten, in first grade, those are the first adults outside of the home that a young person is choosing to trust, right? It's the first opportunity that an adult has to show a young person you can trust someone beyond your at-home adults. And those young elementary teachers are also often named still by high schoolers and middle schoolers
That's
as their
something.
trusted adults. Like, if I would still go back to that person. And I think a really important distinction is trusted adult, the term often gets used in response to the things that you just talked about, right? When there's a concern, go to a trusted adult. When you have a worry, go to a trusted adult. When you have a question, go to a trusted adult. But that trust has to be built so much sooner. And there's other ways that trusted adults can work to prevent those things before they're the trusted adult on the response side, right? So as a dean of students, I spent all my time putting out fires and
Oh, I
said,
can
I
imagine.
just want to be on the proactive side. I want to be proactive. I want to create curriculum. I want to run programs to get kids excited about something so that they're not seeking this, or this, or this, or this, or
Well,
this.
but I'm thinking too, as you're talking about it, it's so empowering for children that is, of course, another one of those golden threads that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they can make that discernment, and also then the teachers are coming to them as well. What a wonderful, it's like coming back and forth with each other, because it's then becomes a system that is working in synchronicity. Because I was also thinking gosh, if I was a teacher and I was thinking, oh, I'm so busy, I'm burned out, and you came in and started talking to me about a trusted adult, I could say, oh my gosh, I need to be more of a trusted adult. I'm so into, like, I have to get the ABCs done, right? Then all of a sudden, this little person came up to me. I said, well, you can come and talk to me later. I mean, I know that happens,
Yes.
but I would think that there's also something, I'm not to say that you're doing something to create shame in teachers, but that
No.
it's an awareness, almost an awareness practice
And
of what you do matters.
I come from the work.
Yes.
I'm a practitioner and I know that. And so there were often times I shuffled students along, because I had to get to this meeting or this adult thing. And it, laying at night and reflecting on my day or journaling, it's like, oh my goodness, that was like, algebra is not the destination. Algebra is the avenue to
Yes.
the relationship and to the real bigger
Or
learning.
maybe not. I can still remember my algebra teacher. Her name was Sister Jesu de Cristo, and she was so scary. I didn't do very well in algebra, Brooklyn.
Me neither. Join the
No.
club.
So anyway, I just, all of a sudden you sparked a memory. But I remember Mrs. Placer. She was
Mhm.
my fifth grade teacher, and she was beloved by all the children.
Mhm.
And she had this way of just, almost, I can just see her right now. I'm sure she's long gone, that she would just embrace children in the way she spoke to them.
Mhm.
She had that talent.
Do you know what it was about the way she spoke? Do you
Well,
remember?
I think, she also taught us how to sing. And so we would have these, and I like singing. So we would have choir, and I think she's probably had us sing more than she was supposed to, because she liked singing a lot. So I think that was part of it. But she just had a presence of kindness,
Mhm.
and also, I would say, compassion.
Mhm.
And I just felt that from her. It
Mhm.
wasn't necessarily anything that I can say, oh, I kind of remember a moment or anything. It was what she conveyed in how she treated others. And that was also how she treated the parents. It wasn't only the children, because my mother was from another country, so she had a very thick accent.
Mhm.
And I always like had my radar up to see if they would, treat her with respect.
Yeah.
And of course she did. She actually ended up coming to my mother ended up being a teacher at the school. She taught Spanish. And so I could also see that close up front,
Wow.
those kinds of relationships.
Yeah. That's incredible. I love that story. So there
Yeah.
was you mean the treating of all people with that respect and compassion that you mentioned.
Well, I think so. And when I think about, I grew up in a community. It was Catholic, and but there were lots of trusted adults. I mean, so I know that we know that there are some horrible priests out there that did terrible things, but I think the majority of us had people within the community that were actually lovely. And we had, there were nuns, there were people that worked at the schools, there were people that I knew that I could go to and that I trusted.
Mhm.
And I know that wasn't everyone's experience, but I'm wondering also if that discernment was more entrenched, if we could also prevent, as we said before, the abuse that sometimes has happened, that then the children and the parents would have been better equipped, that not just trust someone because of their role um, as a higher administrator, which I would think that would be so important part of what you do. Oh
Yes.
my goodness, it's almost time for our break, Brooklyn. I don't think we're going to get to all of our questions. I'm obviously going to have you on again, um,
Yes.
since we're just halfway
Uh,
through, like the first couple of questions we prepared. But
yes.
we're going to take a short break, and then we'll come back, listeners. And oh my goodness, I think if you're excited as I am, I want to hear more about the program and the ABCs, and really talk a little bit more and do a deeper dive in, how also we could bring this to our communities if people are listening going, we need this. How do we get this to our community so that our schools can benefit from the work that you're doing in One Trusted Adult? So we will be back in just a couple minutes, and we will continue our conversation with Brooklyn Raney. Welcome back. I'm here with Brooklyn Raney, and she's talking about her book, One Trusted Adult. And also, we're talking about the program, One Trusted Adult, that's being integrated in schools across America and maybe Canada too, since you've originated from Canada. So we're going to continue our discussion. And I'm going to just talk a little bit more about this question. Why does everyone need to have a trusted adult or to be that trusted adult?
That is the question,
That's the
right?
question. All right.
So many preventative factors that can occur, protective factors that occur when we have that relationship. And if you, I mean, let's take a walk back, Elaine. Would you say that anyone showed up for you, and could you
Well,
describe
yeah,
how
I
they
have to
did?
say that my family life was a bit tumultuous. My mom sometimes was erratic in her behaviors. I would say she probably had a mental health condition. And my dad, he recovered from alcoholism, but he was an alcoholic. So you can imagine in the childhood that I had, and I was the oldest kid. So there was a lot of, it was a tumultuous life. And I often, can think of myself kind of protecting my younger siblings when things would happen in the household. But I got to go to my grandma's house. And my grandmother was from El Salvador. Her name was Eva Pineda. And she actually ended up marrying an American, Macaulay, when she came from El Salvador, her second husband. And she was lovely. We would call her Abuelita Linda. So it's the sweet, beautiful grandmother. And I really can just think of her beautiful brown eyes. And she had this way of just imbuing in us that we were so important and so loved. And so when I think about her, I really do think she was one of the saviors of my childhood. And when I did her eulogy at her funeral, I went and asked my siblings about their recollections of her, and almost every single one felt that she was their favorite. I thought that is a talent for a grandparent, right? To think that you are her
Grandma
favorite.
Eva did it well.
Yes,
Yes.
she did that so well. And I actually have a picture of her. This is her as a very young woman. She was very beautiful.
Beautiful.
And I have some other picture that's harder for me to grab of her as an elderly person, but she was just the most loving person and kind and compassionate. So those qualities that we've been talking about, that she was certainly that for me. And those people that may be listening to the show that have listened to other broadcasts, I often bring her in because oftentimes when I'm talking to people about the resources in their life and what's helped them get through difficult experiences, they will bring up a grandparent or some, as you say, now I have a new term, or some trusted adult
Yes.
that really saved them during a tumultuous childhood. So I love that you asked me that question. So
And
tell me more. So it
yeah,
sounds
so
like my
we
grandmother was one of those trusted adults.
yes, I love that story. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And can you believe this is the work I get to do, to ask people
Oh,
about
I mean,
their
isn't that
wonderful
lovely that, because
humans?
what you're doing is you're accessing
Mhm.
the gratitudes we have in our life. And you know that we have brain circuitry
Yes.
that are laid down in our brain that recognizes gratitude. So that our parts of our brain are going, woohoo, thank you,
Yeah.
Brooklyn. I'm
We
I'm
say
having a great memory.
at the end of our training, no matter, like, if you take away nothing else, go back and thank the person who showed up for you, because that puts fuel in their tank to keep showing up. If they have passed, reach out to their children, journal about it yourself, because it does activate something in us and reminds us who showed up for us and how we want to show up for other people.
Well, and if I can just kind of integrate, because it's hard for me not to. So in the model that, I've created, community resiliency model, we have talked a lot in these my shows about interceptive awareness.
Mhm.
And that's our capacity to sense our well-being,
Mhm.
also to sense, when we're in distress, like if we go outside and it's too cold, it would cause an action of putting on a jacket. Well, and the same thing is true. So when you tell me about when I just remembered my grandma, it wasn't just a thought. It was not only just a feeling, but it was a sensation. And
Mm.
that sensation is like she was here presently with me right now. And that sensory awareness for what we do in the world in CRIM, the community resiliency model, is when we sense it. it's like saving it to the hard drive of our nervous system.
Yeah.
So it actually embeds our well-being in a practiced awareness. It's an awareness practice
Mhm.
that actually helps to even deepen it. So I'm just adding that. I can't wait till you learn more about what we do, because
I can't either. I
I
just
can
wrote that
see the
down.
synergy between the two. Yes.
Interceptive awareness.
Yes,
I
interoceptive
love
awareness.
that
Yeah.
example of the
So
jacket.
I'm feeling really good right now. So thank you for being on the show
Yeah,
today.
you're welcome.
So so
Well,
tell us more. Come on, tell
yeah,
us
I
more.
would imagine. Well, one thing I want to say is that you and I can call up good memories, right? Of
Yes.
good, of amazing trusted adults who showed up for us. And when I run this exercise with, let's say, educators, any youth serving professionals, but I'm in schools a lot, there's typically 30 to 40% of people who cannot name someone. And for me, I look at them and I say, you are superheroes because you're showing up for kids in a way that no one showed up for you. I have a model. People poured into me. I show up for kids in the way that I was shown up for. And there's a lot of educators doing this who didn't have a model. And that's again why we're pushing to create these really specific strategies and tools. And I would guess that your grandmother hit for you what we call the basics. Like we talk about getting back to the basics, and that's belonging and membership. She
Yes.
helped you create some sense of belonging and membership, ability to contribute. She might have asked you to help in some way, offer your skills,
We
gifts.
would make lemonade together.
Yes, there it is.
We would pick the lemons from the backyard and make lemonade
Yes.
together. Yes.
Wow. That's it. Safety and structure, independence and control, competence and mastery, and then self awareness and a greater connection to community. That those are the things when we talk about youth serving spaces like fish tanks, and that these are things. It's like the water, right? The fish are swimming around and they're not like, how's the water? Warm. They're just in the water, right? Like we are in the air. We are in the we're just living in a space. Those are the things that we're trying to make sure our fish tank achieves. So the way that you might clean the fish tank or assess the, I don't know, the pH levels or the decorations or whatever, we want to assess the basics in our spaces. How am I, as a trusted adult, providing an opportunity for young people to feel a sense of belonging, or to feel a sense of contribution, or to feel a sense of safety and security?
Well,
And
I
those are the
think and
strategies
those are
we're looking
just so important. I mean, to me, you're talking about foundational pillars of if every child had that,
at. Yes.
how that, might be different. And also I'm thinking about the 30% that you're talking to that don't have it. Because I mean, I imagine there can be moments where people can get very upset with that realization. And I'm thinking about a guest I had on my show um, yesterday, and she'd had a really what sounded like a torturous childhood, and yet she has created meaning and purpose. And I
Mhm.
think I just wanted to bring that in. Meaning and
Yeah.
purpose can also be what we didn't have,
Yes.
because as you say, they're now contributing to children. And I've seen where meaning and purpose can really shift that tragedies of childhood into the well springs of well-being in the present moment. And how wonderful is that, that you can also remind people that
Yeah.
that is also, that I always say, well, what else is true? What
Yeah.
else is true is that you're doing this. I mean, in fact, I just had someone contact me and said, Elaine, do you have good handwriting? And I said, well, yeah. She goes, well, I'm thinking about getting a tattoo about what you always say. And so she actually wanted me to write out my what else is true to tattoo
Whoa.
on her arm. I'm going, oh my, no one's ever said that to me before.
That's
But I
next
just think,
level. That's got to
well,
be like a Olympic
well,
gold medal or
it's such a
something.
sweet thing that she was saying. But I guess what I'm saying is that I think that when we bring in that wellspring of gratitudes and reminders
Mhm.
of that, yes, we may have had trauma or hardship, but there's also something true about us, because sometimes that can get shrouded
Yeah.
by the living of life. And when I'm hearing you talk, Brooklyn, I think that you're taking that shroud off for people that didn't get what they needed, to start creating that in the present moment, which to me is how we create a better world, that maybe a world that wouldn't have war, the world that would have more greater peace. I mean, I know that sometimes I just got people go, oh, Elaine, you're always thinking up there, but how do we change that if not by this, in a foundational pillar of life, right?
Exactly. Exactly. I'm up there with you. And
Okay, well, hey,
someone on a show asked me, well, what's a realistic number of kids who could name a trusted adult at school? And I said 100%. And well, but realistically, what are you aiming for? And I said 100%.
100%. I am with you, girl.
Everything
Okay.
else is failure. Yeah.
No, and so I mean, I think it's so possible. And so so let's talk a little bit more about this. So if you're gonna, how does the school how do they find you? How do you get I mean, I would love to see you in every single school with these ideas. So if we were to say, okay, we have a new goal here together. Maybe you already had it. 100% of schools.
100%.
Okay.
I'm
How do we
in.
get it? How do we get you into 100% of schools
I'm
with these
in.
concepts of trusted adults? All right. So let's hear what you have to say about that.
That's what me and this incredible team that I've recruited are working on. So we are turning One Trusted Adult training into an e-course so that it is accessible financially and just, I can't fly around to every school. So the e-course is made for parents, guardians, foster parents, juvenile justice, educators. It really is this, how to be a trusted adult, how to show up and earn the trust of young people, and what to do once you've earned it, and how to stay boundaried to protect young people and to protect ourselves. That is at the core of it. It's a 3-part e-course. We also do in-person professional development. Operation OTA, which I mentioned earlier, is this assessment tool. It's all packaged so you can do it yourself. I call it DIY PD. You get the slides, you get the quiz, you get everything to do it yourself. And then we have an advisory program for both middle school and high school, something called Ripple Journals, which is ask young people to dig in and reflect on their solo circle, who they are, their inner circle, peers, close friends, and their outer circle, impact they want to have on the world. And we talk about it as, growing personal skills for community contribution and leadership. And it's got those basics that I mentioned in the core throughout it. And it's also a boundaried curriculum so that educators don't get put in the place of being a therapist or a social worker or a mental health professional, right? That it remains on this side of that chain link fence.
What I call the natural leaders of a school system. Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I think because, and I so agree with what you're doing, because I think we have to engage the entire system if we're going to
Yes.
create the kind of change
Yeah.
that really can be so fundamental for children as they're growing to learn things in a different way. But I
Yes.
also want to say one other thing about the way you're describing the program is, having been, worked with schools for many years, sometimes programs come in and then they leave. And
Yes.
so then it's left. Okay, so now what do we do? And people get real excited about the idea. And then, okay, it's gone. And who's going to be the leadership of carrying it forward? I like that you have created a system of continued ideas and support of the children and the leaders in the school, because otherwise things tend to kind of dissipate.
Oh yeah.
So it
I
sounds like it
told you
was
I was a
very,
practitioner.
so I think that, I think I just want to emphasize that, because there are many times the frustrations of paying a lot of money for something
Yes.
and then it doesn't really pan out into systemic change.
That's
So it
exactly
sounds like you've really considered that. I don't know if you want to
everything.
talk a little bit more about that, Brooklyn, because I think
Yeah.
that's an important piece.
Specifically with our middle school and high school advisory curriculum. So our advisory curriculum in high school is called Branch Out, and it's really tools and strategies, discussion prompts, activities for growing connection and community. And the high school one is amazing because it can be student led. And
Yes.
that hits the youth needs. It allows practicing of leadership, public speaking, and it's read along. There's no prep, very few props. It's just download this thing and go. Again, I've been the educator who's been had all the initiatives and all the ideas and all the programs dropped in my lap. And it's been really exciting for a year and then gone exactly as you just described. And so I am dedicated to making sure that that is not the case with anything we create. The beauty in it is Ripple Journal, there's 4 of them. And so it's 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Or your school can do one year as a whole school, one the next year. You can choose, but it rotates so that at the end of the year, we don't say, that was awesome, but what are we going to do next year? It's meant to cover you for that whole year.
To continue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm all about saving the summers of school administrators and school counselors who develop these things. Like, here it is. Your summer is back. You can enjoy and
Well,
relax.
and I think that is something else that we've certainly heard, is that sometimes when new ideas come in, the teachers are already, like you said in the beginning, they can be so burnt out. Oh, you want me to do one more thing?
Right.
How could I do one more thing? But this sounds like it's so integrated in just like the activities of daily living of being a teacher and a student, that it doesn't seem burdensome to me as you talk about it. I mean, can you address that a little bit? Because I'm sure you've encountered the same thing.
Yes. A big mantra of ours is with, not for. So I'm not
Yes.
training adults to go in and do this thing for young people. We're actually giving them tools to do something with young people. So the
Yeah.
idea of the journals is you actually sit down and you work through the journals together. And there's ideas
Yes.
for extension activities, but at the very basics, you just work through the journal together. At the high school level, we're trying to make it student led so it's less of a burden on the educator, and it takes advantage of this great opportunity for young people to lead. So we've thought through all of that. We've talked to many educators. We've gotten tons of input from public, private, charter, you name it.
Well,
We're
it sounds like it's been well thought out. And I have another question because I think this is so important for all of us in the world, but is the whole issue of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And that, I've seen where ideas have been created by a certain bucket of people that are working in middle and upper middle class areas. And they're not considering children that have less advantage because they're coming from a place of advantage.
yeah.
So I'm just wondering if you've considered those things and how you have you included inclusivity in terms of people who are advising you in how you're bringing this forward.
Yes. So think tanks and groups, a big part of my doctoral study is bringing groups together to think through equity issue always. At the core, like one pathway to disrupting inequitable systems is to provide mentorship to young people, right? It's to provide opportunity for youth voice. It's to practice appropriate and healthy boundaries.
Mhm.
And it's to invest leadership skills in all young people. So we've had many readers of what we're working on and many reviewers, and not just within the United States, but internationally. So we're looking at all kinds of diversity in the way that we look at these products. And the beauty, they're so flexible and they're off the shelf that you can turn them into whatever you need them to be. We have groups using them as a peer mentorship program. We have groups
Yeah.
using it as an actual leadership course. We have it as an advisory program. So what is really unique, I think, about what we're delivering is that at the core of it all is providing an opportunity for potential trusted adults and young people to work together on something positive to enhance and create that relationship, but while maintaining boundaries.
Oh, that's great. I just heard this term that I had never heard before, and it was actually attached to healthcare, but it was called "We have colonialism in healthcare in America." And then someone said to me, "Oh, we have colonialism in the education system," and it comes from not including everyone at the table. But it sounds like you've really considered that, because I do believe that some of the things that I've seen have not considered all children, but just some children. And that's not going to be leading us to a course that
Yes.
can be helpful.
Have you heard? Yeah, I always hear, excuse me, no decision about us without us.
Yes, I love that.
It's,
No decision about us without us. And I
I need
think
you to
that's
write that
really
down. I'll get that tattooed on my arm in your
okay.
handwriting.
I think I think you need to have your own handwriting with that there, Brooklyn.
But that it's very important to me. Again, because I've been an educator and a practitioner and seen where curriculum or programs fail because they had only been reviewed by a small number of people who they would impact. And we're also a small, nimble company that if we get feedback, we can shift and change and work to help you meet your needs. So,
Well, I think you may only be a small, nimble company for a short period of time if this idea continues. But
yes.
let me ask you, I think, a really important question. Because when we're talking about a trusted adult, which, I just talked to you about my grandma, you talked about people in your life who'd been trusted adults. But what do they do? What does a trusted adult actually do that makes them trustworthy?
So trust again is this sense of, and you talked about it, that I can be vulnerable. I feel safe to be vulnerable with you, and that you won't take advantage of me. Like baseline, right? That is that's where I operate from. I also think in actionizing trust comes through actionizing care and empathy and compassion, and we work through the 4 C's. So they're cheerleaders, they're challengers, they're comforters, and they're coaches. And we work really hard with young people to introduce this concept that care and trust can come through these 4 modes. It can look like these things because it's easy to find it in comfort, right? When we're having a hard time and someone takes care of us, it is easier to build trust and to recognize the care of that person. It's pretty easy to see it in cheerleading, right? Someone's, cheering us on and supporting us and wanting us to reach our goals and find
Yes.
success is
Yes.
there. But when it comes to coaching and challenging, those are also actions of care and opportunities for trust building.
Yes.
Um, but with all of those, there's a boundary blur. There can be a tipping over of using a mode too far, going too far with comforting that I enable a young person, or I go
Right.
too far with challenging that I diminish, or I go too far with coaching that I make their goal, my goal, that I care more as the coach about their success than they do.
Then they do. Yes. You see that happening. Yeah.
And cheerleading can go all the way into, toxic positivity where we're missing learning opportunities, or I'm not seeing you for you because I'm like, tomorrow will be better. Let's just keep going. You got this. Just keep going. So that's where we are centering a lot of our conversation is in helping adults figure out their natural leaning. Often as a parent, I go more to challenger. And how does my husband, my co-parent, balance that? It's so much bigger than, the whole good cop, bad cop we used to operate on. But there's different modes and different levers we can pull in a moment with a young person, depending on where they're at.
Well, I guess I was also I was thinking as you were talking about what it could be of also things when it hasn't been that way. And I was thinking about our new Supreme Court justice that will soon be sworn in, Ketanji Brown Jackson. And the report that one of the school counselors told her not to apply to an Ivy League school because she wouldn't get in. And here she graduated magna cum laude
Yeah.
from Harvard. I mean, she was absolutely capable. And I don't know. So, what do you do with kind of the naysayers as you're coming in with this incredible positivity?
Yeah.
Do you get naysayers? And certainly, you would want to affect that counselor saying, "How dare you say that a young Black student that has a desire to do something that you actually counsel her not to do it?" That kind of infuriates me when I hear these kinds of things.
Absolutely. And I write about that in a goal setting section of the book because I had a student just like, well, not just like, because she definitely wanted to go to an Ivy League, and I would never tell a student that they couldn't. But most of her testing and scores would indicate that it was unlikely. And I wanted to be honest and real with her, but I wanted to support her in whatever she wanted to try to do. And there's a real danger in setting goals and setting limits for young people. If I set a goal way up here for a young person, they might look at that and say, I'm not trying, no way. And if I set it too low, they look at that and say, that's all you think of me. And so it's dangerous. It's dangerous territory. I would never set a goal for a young person. I think our job is to listen to their excitements, their passion, their desire, their commitment, and help them set a goal for themselves. And then we nudge them like an inch further, a minute faster than where they thought they could go. I also think it's important that we sit down and write our own goals using the same model. We have a Ripple model through the Ripple journals.
Yes.
We set our own goals beside them, and we actually ask the young people to hold us accountable to our goals. And then you learn a lot. If a young person's holding you to your goals, you learn how they want to be spoken to, how they are encouraged, how they are motivated, and you can turn that and use it back. So it's always back, for me, it's always back to the with, not for, And typically when I'm running these trainings, there's certainly naysayers. I love the people in the back with their arms crossed who are like, trusted adult, what is this? I just want to teach math, or I just want to teach history. Because the people up front, they're like excited I'm there because they do this work and they feel validated and they feel energized by hearing like why it's so important. And my goal always is to get that person in the back to unfold their arms and to just open up their mind and idea and their compassion to the idea that they can make an extreme positive difference just by showing up, naming someone, knowing someone, caring for someone, living the ABCs, and then working to build on those basics. Mm-hmm. Again, the belonging.
Well, and as you were talking, I was thinking about my teachers, and it was the ones I remember are the ones that made me feel like I had value. Mm-hmm. And there were certainly some that made me feel like I didn't have value. And I remember them too.
Yes.
But I think what we're talking about is really pivoting with discernment to how we, with intentionality, become that trusted adult.
Yes.
and role model that. And Brooklyn, I told you this would happen. We're almost to the end of the show, and here
Ooh,
we are together. So is there
no.
one, just parting thought that you can say in a minute or less about what you want people to know about one trusted adult?
We always finish by saying, be who you need and be who you needed. And that is an important phrase for me because when in doubt, when I'm not sure how to support someone, when I don't have the words or the perfect card or the gift, or I'm just not sure, take a breath and think, okay, who would I have needed in this situation? Who did I need when I was in that situation? Who did I need when I was younger? And most often it's a listener, right? It's quieter than we usually make it out to
Yes.
be.
Yes.
It's less than we make it out to be, not more. And so I would encourage people to just pause and ask themselves, who did I need and who do I need now? And show up in that way for other people.
All right. That's just beautiful. And so the other thing, if people want to get a hold of you, can you tell us your website so
Yes.
how they can get a hold of you?
You can find us at onetrustedadult.com. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. We're out there.
Your
We would
your
love it.
social media up. All right, that's good.
Yes.
And they
All
can
around.
find your book, I imagine, on Amazon, One Trusted.
On our website or on Amazon, yes.
Okay, so One Trusted Adult, and I hope everybody goes out to buy it. And I want to thank you so much for the work that you're doing. You're really a healer in the world, Brooklyn,
Thank
bringing
you.
these ideas and really empowering people of all ages to be that one trusted adult. And even if, and I love that, even if they didn't have it when they were children, they can be that to someone else. So remember what else is true. I think Brooklyn's ideas are the very essence of what we've been talking about in this show for the last year and a half. What else is true? So until we meet again, I will see you next time. And this is Elaine Miller Karras signing out for Resiliency Within. Thank you again, Brooklyn. Much
Thank you.
gratitude to you.
Thank you so much.